Hi, everyone. I'm Ophelia Jacobson with Campus Reform, and we've got another great interview lined up for you today. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and to give this video a like if you want to see more content like this from Campus Reform. Today, I am joined by economist Mr. Paul Rubin, who wrote a book titled A Student Guides to Socialism: How It Will Trash Your Lives. He joined me today to talk about this book and how it relates to students. Mr. Rubin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm always glad to talk to students.
So let's go ahead and get started. Tell us a little bit about this book and what its message is.
Well, most books about socialism are historical. They talk about different countries that have been socialist and how badly they've done, which is true. They've all done badly. But to students, that's not so relevant. That's history. That's what's happened in the past. But what I do in this book is I say, if you're a 20, 22-year-old, 25-year-old college student, or even younger, a high school student today, and we would adopt a socialist economy, which we're much closer to doing than I thought we would be, what would the next 40 years of your life be like? So it's really a forward-looking book rather than a past-looking book.
So we've seen support for socialism grow on college campuses and among young students. Is this the main reason you decided to write the book this year?
It is, yes. I'm a retired professor, and part of me felt guilty because we professors economics professors particularly, have not done a good job of teaching our students the way socialism works, the way capitalism and socialism work. And part of it was I just astounded that students, so many students have a favorable view of socialism, and particularly because they'll be the ones that are hurt by socialism. Someone like me, I'm pretty old. I've got the money that I have, which is enough to live on for the rest of my life quite comfortably. Socialism really won't do much to me. But to young people who have their whole career in front of them, socialism will be very, very harmful. And so I thought, as I say, I've just been amazed to see those beliefs. And I said, well, I'll do what I can do to try to explain the truth to younger people.
So in your book, you counter socialism with an economic message, which is obviously the best fact-based argument there is. How do you go about doing this in your book?
Well, I just assumed that socialism will lead to a lower rate of growth than capitalism. It's always been true. It'll probably be a negative rate of growth. But in fact, after I wrote this book, just recently, some economists of Stanford have calculated that if we adopt President Biden's policies, which are somewhat socialist, but not fully socialist, nonetheless, in 10 years, family incomes will be $6,000 less than they would have otherwise been. I would have put that number in my book if it had been available when I wrote it, but it's a more precise number. But in my book, I do say that it's very clear that students will lose over their lifetime a lot of money if we adopt a socialist thing. So people in America are used to things getting better and having a bigger house than your parents had, nicer cars. And yet, if we were to adopt socialism, you would actually be much worse off than your parents, or even than your grandparents, probably, which is not something we expect in America.
So what would you say is your main argument to students who may think that socialism is good for them?
Well, particularly for students now, if we were to start to adopt socialism, it would create a lot of uncertainty. Nobody would know what we were doing. And when there's uncertainty in the economy, aside from the fact that growth would be lower and they'd be poorer, when there's uncertainty, employers don't want to hire. They don't want to hire people for good jobs. And so those of you who are, you said you're a junior, juniors, seniors. I have a couple of grandchildren who just graduated looking for jobs. People looking for jobs in the face of a newly established socialist economy would get very bad jobs. People won't hire you for long-term jobs when they aren't sure of what the long-term will look like. And the evidence is very clear from economists. If you start off with a bad job, it follows you your whole career. So the people that are now pushing for socialism, as bad as it would be for everyone, it will be even worse for them because they will be the first generation to move into socialism. Lenin said, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. He was talking about killing people, of course. We're not talking about killing you, but you nonetheless will be a broken egg when it comes to your future possibilities.
And that's right. Well, the fact is, despite the advancements capitalism has made, millennials are the first generation that might be worse off financially than their parents were. And a lot of these young students come out of school with tremendous amounts of debt. So a combination of things, tough economic times, may push them to believe that socialism is the answer. Why isn't socialism the answer in these circumstances?
Well, because socialism has the money that they expect to get has to come from somewhere, and it comes from higher taxes. Higher taxes mean that employers don't hire as much. It means the salaries are lower. It means there's less innovation, less investment. I'm amazed that I have a little fake story in my book about a student who is going to a lecture on socialism, and he finds out about it on his computer, and he coordinates with his friends on his cell phone, and he takes an Uber, and he maybe plays a little Fortnite on his way over. All of those things are products of capitalism. Things that students love are products of capitalism. They've been invented under capitalism, never under socialism. And yet, if we were to go to socialism, there wouldn't be as many new things, and the old things would not change as rapidly as they do, because it wouldn't pay for people to invest in improving the products.
So how do those of us who stand against socialism, how would you recommend us making the case to them with this in mind?
Well, it's hard. I mean, the simplest example is Venezuela. I know people don't know much about it, but Venezuela has just recently adopted socialism. It went from being a thriving, one of the wealthiest economies in South America, to a disaster where people are starving, trying to leave the country. Women are engaging in prostitution because they would do anything for money to feed their children. It's become a total disaster. And maybe try to point that out, say, so you don't have to go to history. You can say we can look just right near in South America. We can see Venezuela and what's happened there. Or you can talk about the fact that growth will be lower. Socialism will make the economy just poorer, and they will be poorer as well. It'll make the trouble from the virus, which of course is terrible, it'll make it look like a day in the park. It'll be much worse than the virus.
And you have a good point. I mean, a lot of people use the arguments, look at Cuba, look at Venezuela, to try and disprove socialism and to counter socialism. But some argue that those arguments don't necessarily work because the students have never been to those countries and have never really lived in those countries. So how would you suggest finding another argument against socialism?
Yeah, well, as I say, it's ask them about just the things I mentioned before. Do you like your cell phone? Do you like your computer? You know, those were invented under capitalism, not under socialism, and they won't be improved under socialism. We're used to getting a new cell phone every couple of 3 years because they're so much better. That won't happen anymore. They also might. There's students around from countries in Latin America that have lived under socialism, and if you could just talk to some of those students, I know they tend to be the ones who are most resistant to it. People who lived in those circumstances and come here, if you ask them what happened when your country became socialist, they will be happy to tell you, and you will learn it's really very, very bad.
And why did you feel it was so important to write this book in 2020?
Well, because I was, as you said, I was reading these numbers about 50 and 60% of college students think that socialism is better than capitalism, and it just happened now. And of course, it was just astounding to me that we thought when Russia collapsed, we thought, which was before your time, but we thought, well, now we've learned that capitalism is a much better system. We don't have to worry about socialism anymore. There's other things to worry about, but we've learned that capitalism is much better. And lo and behold, we haven't. I mean, it's one article I wrote. I talk about one of the movies where someone they think is dead and then pops out of the bathtub with a knife. And I said, that's what socialism's like. We thought we had killed it, and here it comes again, swinging its hammer and sickle, trying to destroy us again. So it was just astounding to me. And then, quite frankly, I retired a couple of years ago, and I had some time, and I thought this would be a very good way to spend my time trying to move the needle as far as I could move it away from socialism towards understanding of markets and capitalism.
Well, thank you so much again for taking the time to do this interview. We encourage our viewers to buy the book on Amazon so you can combat socialism on your college campus. And again, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to do this interview, Mr. Rubin. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you also. Good luck to you.